All right, looks like the comment line is open. If anybody joins, you can go ahead and throw out your thoughts and feelings right there. I would love to welcome everyone. I am Dave Nelson, and I am the host for this evening's utterly epic show. Okay, I think the team really put together a good one here. As always, though, I should say it's always a good one, and we got to give it up for the crew. Okay, so give it up for the crew. Looking good. Okay, now. You gotta admit, you could go other places for your culinary entertainment dollar, right? But is there really a better value out there for a fake toll-free online cooking variety show? I don't think there is. I submit it to you. Okay, and so let's see. Today we are talking about the Tao of Pizza. Okay, now while I am a meager and possibly unworthy as a spiritual guide, I feel I might be able to crack open a few of the universal absolutes that underlie the pizza. Beginning really mainly with the dough, the harmony between flour and yeast, and following a natural progression that will lead us to enlightenment and eventually nirvana on a flatbread. But before we get into that, I got to cover a few announcements. Looks like a couple of people are out there. Thanks for joining. You're in the industry cooking community, and we're just getting rolling. Okay, we got a comment line, so if anybody has any thoughts or feelings, just shout those on out. Okay, operators are standing by. All right. If you are digging what I'm laying down here, I should say that there are loads of archives with super sweet cooking demos. We got amazing food interviews going on over there. It's over on the YouTube side again at Industry Cooking. Okay, that's what you're gonna find. That's where you're gonna find all this stuff. We're almost ready to go on the show. I think that kind of concludes all of the vulgar administrative bulletins that I needed to throw out there. So let's go ahead and do this, ladies and gentlemen. Industry Cooking Classes presents the Tao of Pizza. Okay, to begin on the path of pizza, you must first understand universal truths about yeast dough. And I gotta say, I gotta be honest with you guys, this show really isn't about pizza. It really is about yeast dough and how to work with any yeast dough. So that's kind of what I'm gonna be talking about mostly. And then you'll see me throw a few toppings on and bake it off, right? But first of all, we need to take our first steps on the path of yeast doughs. That's really what I wanna talk about, okay? So first of all, before we do that, we need to kind of talk about what yeast is and what does it do, okay? First of all, yeast is a plant. I don't know if you know that, but it is a plant, okay, as opposed to an animal, okay? It is a leavener, and what leaveners do in bread is they make the bread rise, okay? There are different leaveners out there. We have chemical leaveners like your baking powder. All you got to do is put a little baking powder in a recipe, and that item will rise, right? Throw it in your muffin mix, whatever. You're gonna get an oven spring when you bake those muffins, okay? So chemical leaveners help you rise your baked goods, right? If that's a way to put it, right? Help you rise, okay? We also have physical leaveners, like when we whip air into something, that incorporates air, which is trapped in kind of a matrix of doughy, gooey dough, right? And that air trapped in that matrix is going to go into an oven and it's going to expand, right? When it heats, right? And so that would be physical, right? Adding air into the process when I whip eggs to go into a sponge cake or something like that. Hey Trey, good to see you out there, man. Oh yeah, nice new kitchen. I'm loving the new kitchen. Thanks for the shout out, right? So we were just talking about different leaveners. Again, they give us the spring or the rise in our breads, right? We talked about chemical and physical. Now we're going to get into biological leaveners, and that's kind of what we're talking about tonight, okay? When we're talking about biological leaveners, of course, we are mentioning things like yeast, and we are also talking about sourdough, which is just basically wild yeast. You capture a wild yeast and use that in your baking. So for all intents and purposes, this discussion tonight is a lot about yeast doughs, okay? So let's kind of talk a little bit about yeast itself, okay? First of all, yeast, what does it need to do its thing in our baked goods and in our wine as well, right? We use it to create alcohol in wine, beer, things like that, right? So what does yeast need from us, right? First of all, yeast are actually kind of a lot like most other living organisms, okay? They're gonna want food, okay? They gotta eat. They're gonna want moisture, you know, or they will desiccate just like we would desiccate without water, right? They need the proper pH, right? If we're in a vat of acid, you and I aren't gonna survive very well. Neither is a yeast, right? They need, you know, basically the proper temperature range to live in, right? We can't live in a certain, we can only live in a very narrow temperature range ourselves, right? So yeast need those things, right? And when I put yeast together with the proper environment as far as pH and temperature and all of that, and I give it some food and it's got enough moisture to do its thing, and I give it that time to do it, I am going to get two byproducts from that yeast. One of them is alcohol, and we know this from beer, wine, all of that good stuff, right? I've made a couple of country wines in this little series that I'm doing here, right? So that is where alcohol comes from, but it also creates CO2 gas, and CO2 gas is our friend for today's adventure, okay? That CO2 gas is gonna get trapped inside a glutinous dough matrix, okay? Our bread, or in this case, pizza dough today. And that dough is going to expand over time, given the proper growth conditions, food, moisture, warmth, right? And time, right? And as it expands over time, it's going to double in size. It literally expands over time, okay? So now I've got twice the volume in my dough because of this CO2 gas in there. And then, so that's some of the leavening power, but I get even more leavening power when I put that item, that bread, that pizza dough, whatever it is, into the oven. Those trapped gases then warm and they're going to expand further. And this is what you'll hear me call oven spring all evening long, right? Hey, Debbie Cunningham's out there getting the sourdough starter from a friend on Wednesday. Awesome. I'm going to be playing with a little sourdough one of these days myself. In fact, if we get bored tonight, maybe I'll bust some out. We can talk a little bit about that. So if you got questions, shout them out. So we left off at oven spring, right? We don't just get the expansion through the proofing. We also get it when we bake, when gases expand when they're heated. We get that oven spring, okay? To bring it all around, what are we talking about? We're talking about leavening in breads and doughs, and that's pretty much the Tao of pizza, right? You got to understand a yeast dough to be able to make a basic pizza, okay? So now that we've kind of talked about yeast itself and what it likes and what it needs and its hopes and dreams and aspirations, okay? We can go ahead and start looking down a path to pizza dough, okay? Or any really, this is all, okay, this is the Tao of pizza, right? But this is really a metaphor for any yeast dough. It all works the same way. And that's kind of the secret behind this class. It's not so much about pizza, it's about yeast doughs here, okay? So the path to pizza dough or any other yeast dough, it's going to involve 10 steps, okay? So those steps, if you have ever made bread, played with bread, done anything with yeast or anything, this is going to sound very familiar to you. You may not, know the names of all of these steps, but this process will sound familiar to you, okay? First of all, you scale your ingredients. We usually weigh our ingredients in professional kitchens. I don't really talk about, using cups and stuff like that, okay? So we scale our ingredients, okay? We mix our doughs, right? And different mixing methods are used for different doughs. Tonight, I'm going to be showing you the straight mix method, and that's another big lesson behind this pizza, Tao of pizza tonight, right? So the mixing methods, I've done a cookie class before, and the mixing method in there was the creaming mixing method. I did a biscuit class, and the method there was the cut-in method, where I cut fat into the flour and dry ingredients and into small pieces, right? And so this is just another mixing method that I'm putting out there tonight for you guys. And again, it's called the straight mix method. Very, very common with yeast doughs, okay? So we're still talking about the different steps in the process of making any yeast dough, okay? The next step would be a ferment. Once I mix the ingredients, there's yeast in there, I'm gonna ferment that and let that yeast grow and expand, okay? Next, I'm gonna punch and fold it, okay? You'll see what this looks like. I have a few little choice words about punching and folding, okay? Once we punch and fold, get some of that excess air out of there, that CO2 out of there, we're gonna scale it or portion it, okay? Basically, I'm gonna make little balls that I can turn into pizza rounds today, okay? So I'm gonna just really separate this into 4 pieces to work with. but other times we'll scale it, you know, give me a 3-ounce piece for a roll or what have you. Okay. Rounding is another thing we're going to do to get a nice round pizza. We got to start with a nice round shape. So rounding is a step in yeast dough production. Benching, letting things kind of relax. When we work with these doughs, they get very elastic, and we have to let them relax a little bit. So benching is a chance for them to rest so we can work on them. Otherwise, they're just too springy. Okay. Make up the final shaping and topping of our pizza, or the final shaping of bread loaves or bread rolls or anything else that you're working with, any other yeast product. We are making it up. That's the 8th step in the process. Okay. Number 9 is to either proof those items, or sometimes, you know, when we're doing projects in a professional kitchen, we are, you know, doing our makeup of, say, some croissants or something, another yeast dough, by the way. We'll make up our croissants, and then we put them into a refrigerator and just let them sit for like 18 hours. And they proof very, very slowly. And this is a process called retarding the yeast growth, where it goes very, very slowly. And then we can come in the morning and they're all puffed up and ready to go into our oven at 5 a.m., right? So either retarding or proofing would be step number 9, and then finally step 10, we're gonna leave it at baking, okay? And I'll just knock out a few pizzas here. It's different strokes for different things. You'll see me slide some pizzas onto a pizza stone in my little oven, and that's about it, okay? So it looks like we still got some people out there. You guys are hanging with me. That's basically what we're looking at, the 10 steps of yeast dough production, and then you'll see me throw some toppings on top of it. It's not a big huge deal, okay? But this is universal stuff. This is solid gold stuff, and you can use it on so many levels. And so much of this stuff, like I said, if you've baked, so much of this stuff is going to sound super familiar to you. Okay. So number 1, let's start with that step. Okay. Scaling. Okay. We are going to weigh most ingredients in industry kitchens, as I said. Okay. I happen to like metric, but I've got some ingredients listed here in standard avoirdupois, or English measurements, okay? So for our pizza dough, I've got water, okay? 12 ounces of water. I've got a 1/2 ounce of yeast. I've got 15 ounces of bread flour. Bread flour is a high gluten flour, and that's gonna give me a nice elasticity to my dough and a nice chew and crunch to it, okay? Let's see, next item is salt. I need 2 teaspoons of salt here, and then a little bit of oil in there, 1 teaspoon of oil, and that'll give me a little bit of softness and tenderness in that dough, okay? For the metrics, okay, I actually use metric measurements. So I use a little battery powered scale, guys. You can just zip through your recipes if you've got this, and if everything's in metric, it's really a beautiful thing. So metrics, I got 272 grams of water. I got 14 grams of yeast. I've got 465 grams of bread flour, 10 grams of salt, and I just went with the same 1 teaspoon that I was using for the other one. Everybody knows what a teaspoon looks like. In fact, you'll see me just throw a little pinch of salt in there, about a teaspoon, okay? It doesn't have to be so tight, but there it is, folks, the pizza dough recipe. But you know, it's really not about this, guys. It's really about the technique that I'm getting ready to show you. These are just, this is just an experimental animal. 5 ingredients in a recipe, as are most of my recipes. I keep them very, very simple, okay? So let's go ahead and pull my ingredients together, and we'll assemble a dough. Da, da, da. I'm going to start running a little water, and let me get things lined up. And since I'm touching ingredients, I want to wash my hands, and I'm going to get my apron on, okay? Actually do this. I had to wear my pizza outfit, okay, back on my pizza day. This is how I dressed right here. My big old long apron, keep that flour off my nice pants, and away we go. There it is. There it is. Oh, yeah. So let me grab a little water here. I need 12 ounces. And there it is. Almost ready to go. Okay, here are those ingredients again. You can see my 12 ounces of water over here, and I just got very, very slightly warm water here. Now, we talked about temperature with yeast a minute ago. If you get this water too hot, you're going to kill your yeast, and none of this stuff is gonna work, okay? Think about the temperature you like. If it's going to burn you, it's going to kill that yeast. You like a nice warm bath, right? Or even a little bit tepid even, you know, not so hot on a summer day maybe. Think about a summer bath, and that's what yeast is gonna like, okay? Just barely warm to you, okay? So I've got some warm water there, 12 ounces, as I said. I've got ½ ounce of yeast right here. And I'm just going to say that the first step in the straight mix method is to blend your yeast into your water. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour my yeast straight into my water as we go through the rest of these ingredients. The next one is my bread flour. Okay, I've got 15 ounces of bread flour, or 465 grams. I have salt, about 10 grams of salt. And one thing about yeast and salt, yeast doesn't like salt. Just like if we were, you know, sitting in a big pile of salt, it would desiccate us, and like slugs and things like that don't like salt. Those single-celled organisms like yeast and bacteria do not like salt. It'll just cause them to fall apart. So it retards yeast growth is what I want you to take away from this. And so we tend to see recipes talking about adding salt last in the recipe, okay? Hey, Matt Van Kennedy's out there. Good to see you, chef. So there's my salt. I am gonna just kind of dump that in with my dry ingredient at this point, but I just wanted to mention that about salt. Oftentimes it's going into a dough, a yeast-based dough last. Okay, and I've got my ingredients together here. One last thing is just a teaspoon of oil here, and I'm just gonna eyeball that. And there it is, okay? Again, that oil is gonna act as shortening in there, shortening gluten strands, making this slightly more tender of a loaf, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to go ahead and put everything right into a bowl. Let me get a scraper here. Oh yeah, it's the Tao of Pizza tonight. Oh yeah. So here I go. I'm putting my yeast in to the bowl. And there it is. Yeast and water together. This is the straight mix method that we're going into right now. And so we're in step 2. So step 1 of the straight mix method, dissolve yeast into water, into liquid. And then step 2 of that, blend your dry ingredients. And then you're going to combine your dry ingredients into the yeast. And that's what you're going to see now. No big deal. This is called the straight mix method for a reason, because it's just straight up. Get your yeast and liquid together, get your dry together, and then combine them, okay? Now, I'm gonna take a dough hook right now. I'm actually using a machine. This is the first time I busted out a machine for one of these classes. I could definitely do this on the tabletop like we did pasta about 2 weeks ago. So I have hit that with a little bit of love, okay? A little bit of elbow grease. I'm gonna hang on to my bowl, and I'm gonna hang on to my rubber scraper, but I'm gonna get rid of these items here. And I'm going to take my bowl, and we're still continuing with the straight mix method here. I've got a KitchenAid, and I'm going to go ahead and slide it on in there. I've balanced the bowl on the 2 pegs on the side, and then clip it in to its nipple in the back, if you'll excuse me. And then I'm going to go ahead and put on the dough hook attachment. Now, why do we use a dough hook for this? A paddle would rip our dough up, and we want our dough to really kind of be kneaded, and we want gluten strands to kind of stretch across the surface of the dough. We don't want to tear the dough. And so the dough hook is very gentle, and it's, you know, doesn't tear the dough as much as a paddle would, okay? I'm going to raise my bowl here, and I'm just going to kick it on to about 2 just to kind of blend things a little more. And now I'm gonna kick it up a little more. And we're gonna go on about medium here for about 6 minutes. This is gonna be running for a while. If you guys can hear me, that's cool. But if you can't hear me, now's the time to tell me in the comment thread right here. My producer is telling me I wanna get my oven going at this time, okay? So we're gonna fire up the oven. Okay, so I got my oven preheating right now. I didn't want to start it too early. My dough is just flying around in this bowl. And so what I like to do is I want to turn it down. You can see the dough kind of traveled up the dough hook. So I just kind of, this is kind of dangerous, but I kind of hold the bowl on there, and I lower it, turn it up a little, and the dough kind of falls off, and then I pull it back up. And I lower it, the dough falls off again, I pull it back up. And I think what I would like to do is give it just a little scrape here to really manipulate everything and really blend things. Let me go down again. Sorry, everybody. And there it is. Okay. Now this dough, one of the things I wanted to talk about is just the feel of a dough, and it's feeling very nice. This feels like soft enough to work with. It's just, excuse me, it's just barely tacky. It's not really sticking to my hands. It's just barely doing it. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of pull it down off of this dough hook for a sec. I'm going to get in there with my bowl scraper. That is literally the name of this thing. And I'm going to scrape the bowl with my bowl scraper, just making sure that I get into the bottom. And I'm really not trying to tear dough here, although it is kind of tearing slightly. But you can see it's coming together. It still looks a little rough. It's not as smooth as we're going to see in a little while here. And again, we're going to put it on the mixer and just let that dough hook work it probably for another 4 minutes here. I think it's been going for about 2. We're going for a total of like 6 to 8 minutes, okay? And again, what it's doing, it is developing gluten. Get up there. There we go. Always start. So I started that mixer very, very slowly and then kind of kick it up. And now I'm just letting it roll around in there to do its thing. That dough hook is working it. It's not tearing the dough. You can see the mix climbing up the dough hook again. But we are just we're making longer and longer chains of gluten in there. I mentioned in another class, in the pasta class, that it's like the old game of barrel of monkeys, where you're linking up those little plastic monkeys in long chains. That's what you're developing here. The more you knead a dough, the more rubbery and elastic it gets, because you are developing gluten. That's what I'm trying to say. Let me just lean this back. I think that's doing all right. All right, I'm going to go down with my bowl, that old trick again. I just kind of hang on to it and let the dough just kind of drop off and then back up again. And we're going to let this go about 2 more minutes. We're in the mix-in method, okay? I'm in step 2 of yeast dough production. Let me clean up those hands a little bit. So you just saw the straight mix method. Different doughs are going to go at different speeds in the mixer for shorter or longer periods of time, depending on what sort of gluten development you are looking for in that item. And I should mention, you know, things like biscuits and short doughs, you don't want gluten development. So you would never put one of those in a mixer and let it just go round and round. It's like the opposite of what you want to do, okay? Okay, that was the straight mix method. Let's see, next is, we're just going to say it's been about 8 minutes, okay? I think we'll just kind of pull it. So let me go ahead and pull it on off, let you guys see this. I got the bowl down and I got the hook off, and now I'm just going to pick it up on the front, pull it off, and I'll get my bowl scraper again. There it is, my trusty bowl scraper. When you buy one of these, look for a flexible one if you can, because you want it to flex into the corners of the bowl. Question about the dough climbing the dough hook. I recall reading that you should add more flour if it does. Thoughts? It all depends. I don't want to work too much flour into this. I tend to work kind of on the softer side of doughs, Debbie, and so I can always add a little more flour later. I didn't really see this thing climbing out of the bowl. It wasn't doing too much. It wasn't a problem. I was fine with it. So I've got a nice smooth dough in there, and it's got some elasticity to it, right? It's stretchy. It's stretchy. Stretch Armstrong. So I'm going to pull it out of my mixing bowl, or actually I could just leave it in there. And what I'll do is just cover this thing and let it rise, okay? The next step is the bulk ferment. This is step number 3 in making yeast doughs, okay? So we want to kind of think about the temperature here. If you have a super cold kitchen, there's a little bit of dough on my fingers. It's all good stuff. If you have a super cold kitchen, this is going to take forever to rise. It's like trying to proof it or let it rise in a refrigerator or something, right? And so sometimes you will heat up your kitchen. One of the little cheats that I will do, I'm not going to do it with this guy right here, but one of the things I do in my kitchen is I grab a bus tub. If you don't know what a bus tub is, I'm sure you've seen them in restaurants. It's one of these fellas right here, okay? I got a big old bus tub right here, and I put it upside down on my counter. I put a bowl of dough in there, and then I grab just a small narrow pot or a cup or whatever, and I fill it full of hot water, and I stick it in underneath the bus tub with my dough. Okay, it's kind of a hoopty baby little proof box for doing bulk fermentations. Okay, I'm always doing my sourdough breads in there and everything. Okay, so that's a kind of a little cheat that you can do. I don't think we'll need to do it today, but I wanted to show you that. Let me put my bus tub back. All right. So there it is. There's my dough. I'm going to go ahead and just cover that and set it aside and let that kind of proof. It's going to bulk ferment, and it's probably going to go for about an hour, hour and a half. Okay. What we're really looking for, though, it's not a time so much. It's a look, and we're looking for it to double in size. Okay. And so that's where we're going to stop with this dough, and I'm going to bring in another dough. Oh yeah, we still got people out there. We got people out there. Hope you all are enjoying. So I'm just putting a plate on top, and it fits there perfectly. Okay, awesome. Hey Tara, good to see you, girl. We're making yeast doughs today. So let me just kind of pull it on the side. I don't need this thing, but I should say, any tool that you have, any bowl that you have that you're working with doughs, things like that, don't let that thing dry out. If you can't clean it all the way right now, in a pastry shop, we tend to clean our own stuff. We don't give it to the rest of the kitchen, in an industry kitchen, okay? But go ahead and get this thing wet at least. Don't let it get dry. Otherwise, it's really hard to clean this stuff off. You'll thank me for that. We just put our dough up in for step number 3, the bulk ferment. We're gonna pretend that time passed, and I'm gonna pull out another dough that I made earlier today to show you step number 4, punch and fold, okay? And so, let me hang that on up, and we are back. I'm going to pull over a dough that I made today. It's in much too small of a bowl here. It wanted to just kind of blow out of there. And I put a plastic cover on there, and so it's just kind of stuck on there. But this punch and fold, what we're doing in this step is we're just knocking out the excess air. If we did not do this bulk fermentation, if we just went straight with the yeast and in the mix and everything and tried to make pizza out of it, out of the dough we just made, it's going to taste really yeasty. It's going to taste like you're eating a beer, a solid form of beer, okay? And so we get rid of some of those gases, kind of soften that up, but still get a lot of yeast activity in this bulk ferment time. Now it's just active yeast through and through the mix. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that on out of there. To work with this, it's a little bit sticky. As Debbie was saying, this is where I start working with a little flour, okay? So I'm going to work with a different flour than I made this with. I had a bread flour, but right now I'm going to be using a Semolina flour. I used this flour in our pasta the other day. It's a coarser grind, and the dough itself won't soak up as much of this as it would soak up more bread flour because it's much, much finer, okay? So this, less likely to be soaked up, that's the one I wanna use. Another one that you can use at this stage is rice flour, okay? Now, what I'm gonna do is just toss a little semolina over the top, and I'm just gonna get my little spatula in there and hit the sides. You see how I'm kind of bending that spatula with my fingers? And I'm coming all the way around. And once I kind of release the sides of this, I tilt the bowl and I let the dough roll out of there. Remember, I tossed a little bit of flour here. It's going to roll out onto that surface. Yeah. And so right now what I'm doing is the punch and fold step. And I want to get a little flour in the mix here just on the surface. I'm not throwing tons of this down. I don't want it to soak up a bunch of extra flour, but I just want enough of this so I can kind of handle this, okay? And what I'm going to do is just kind of pull up the dough itself and just kind of release some of the gas in there. Now, I didn't knock all of the gas out of there. It's still bubbly and everything, but I just got rid of enough to where this feels more like a dough than a big old sponge, okay? It's a dough that I can work with, okay? So that's kind of the punch and fold. And once you punch and fold that, you can go ahead and start scaling it down, okay? So I've got a pretty regular shape here. And I think what I'm going to do is just eyeball this and make 4 pieces out of this. I want to make fairly small pizzas today. Personal pan pizzas is what we're making, okay? So we're on to step 5, scaling dough. Again, we call it scaling. You can use a scale for this, but in this case, I'm just going to eyeball it. Here we go. I want to get a little flour on that cutter there because it's sticky inside. See, Debbie, I'm working with this. It's just on the edge of being too sticky to work with. That's where I want to be. It's like perfect. Okay, and once I cut those in half, I'm going to cut those pieces in half. So I got quarters, and now I've got some pretty decent shapes. I think these two are a little bigger. So I just scaled it and portioned it into 4 pieces, okay? So that is representative of step number 5 in our 10-step path to pizza dough, okay? Next, I want to go ahead and round these, and I want to create the basic shape of the dough from here, okay? This is just going to be just a partial shaping. I'm not doing the real shaping here, but I just wanted to kind of think about being a round piece of dough, okay? So it's going to look kind of like this. I am just going to, again, get a little flour in the mix. You got some sticky edges there. Get them on your fingers there. And I'm just going to kind of lay it on its smooth side and kind of pull the edges up and just kind of round it out. You guys see what I did there? And I got the sticky side up and the non-sticky side down. There's just the tiniest bit of flour under there, okay? I'm gonna do it again with these guys, okay? So I pull it up and I just kind of lay it on the smooth side and I'm just pulling together the corners, pulling the corners up, and I'm stretching the outside of the dough underneath. This one's sticking a little bit. Let me get a little more flour on this one. See how it's just kind of rounded, and I just kind of pinch that, and the other side is nice and smooth now, okay? And it thinks it's round. It's almost there. I'm gonna get a little more flour on my hands this time. And we'll just shape these last 2 really quick. Boom, boom, boom. Just the basic idea of roundness, okay? I wanna get a little flour down so they're not sticking. And the last one, here we go. There's still a little residual gas in there. I'm feeling little bubbles. This is beautiful. All right, so I've got 4 rounded shapes. And we're still rolling through the 10-step process of making yeast doughs, okay? So we just did step 6, rounding, creating the basic shape of dough from here, okay? I want to go ahead and let this rest a little bit. So I'm going to kind of clean up. And the reason we want to let it rest is because in the next step is going to be number 8, okay? Right now, this is step 7. This is called benching. We're letting our dough relax. And there's my oven. As I let this dough relax, the gluten that I've kind of developed by doing that initial rounding is kind of calming down a little bit, okay? And that is going to allow me to do the next step in this, which is going to be step number 8, the makeup. I'm going to make the shapes. Now, I'm leaving this really, really vague because, again, all of this pizza stuff, it's a metaphor for all yeast doughs. So when I'm doing makeup on bread, that will be the step. Right now we're benching. After benching, we'll be doing, if I'm making bread, that's when I'm making this into a loaf. If I'm making rolls, that makeup is just like getting all those rolls done. I use 2 hands to do that. Maybe we'll do some buns in here one of these days, okay? But makeup, in the case of pizza, we're gonna flatten it and round it out, right? That's what it's gonna look like. And so that's basically what you're gonna be seeing here today, okay? And with any yeast dough, okay? So we'll get back down to those see if there's any questions out there. I need to take a little sip of water. We still got some people in there. Can I use AP flour instead of semolina? You absolutely can. Ideally, I would say use bread flour for this. But again, for the makeup portion of it, a lot of chefs will talk about using, again, a heavier flour. And so I have the semolina, or another opportunity, or another flour you can use is rice flour. That's another one the kids are all using on their sourdough loaves these days, okay? Let me get a little sip of water. Oh, yeah. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the industry cooking community, and we are just throwing down on yeast doughs and in anticipation of making a couple of beautiful little pizzas. I scored some cool mushrooms to use on these guys at a farmer's market. We'll kind of see those in a little bit. It's going to be good stuff. It's going to be good. Again, this is what you have to wear in the kitchen, okay? You need a trucker hat, you need a super long apron, you know, your jeans, and a t-shirt, and that's basically your pizza outfit. You have 97% of the pizza joints out there, okay? All right, so I think what we're gonna do is say, you know, I barely developed any gluten. I'm gonna say, yeah, we can go ahead and start rounding these dough balls out so we can kind of work with them, okay? So here is how you round out a loaf of bread, a dinner roll, anything like that. It's gonna kind of look like this. Now, which one should I do first? I'll move a few out of the way. This one's kind of sticking a little bit. Let me get him on some flour. And so I have the rough side up right now and the smooth side underneath. So I'm going to flip it over. And what I'm going to do is just start spinning it. And I'm going to take the sides of my hands and I'm going to push the dough down underneath. I was rounding out my pasta dough like this just a few weeks ago. And as I do this, I am stretching that glutinous skin on the outside of this dough ball. That's my rounding, and he's looking good. I need to be able to roll these guys in a minute too. I don't want to develop too much gluten. And here it is again. I'm going to really round this out. Again, I'm kind of pulling the dough down and pushing it under the sides with each one of these little motions. And I can see little bubbles in there. I still have some CO2 in there. And I'm just working with very little flour. You haven't seen me add much, okay? Again, the smooth side is underneath, so I'm flipping them every time now, and I am pulling the edges down underneath. Almost there, one more after this. You can see little bubbles in there. And here's another, okay? And by the time you kind of do 20 of these, you know, you're ready to kind of start over and start making your pizzas, okay? Now, there would be another resting time here in an ideal world. I don't know if I flipped that guy over, but he smoothed out nicely. So in an ideal world, we would have a little bit more resting time. I really don't feel like I've developed gluten too much here. But I do, one of the things I want to say before I start rolling these into pizza rounds, okay, is check the shapes. They're all pretty darn round. If you have oblongs and ovals and trapezoids at this stage, you're never going to get a round pizza out of it at the back end, okay? And so make sure that you are getting a nice round shape at this end, and it will follow through for the recipe. So I have this comically huge rolling pin. I just moved and I still haven't found my little tiny rolling pin, my dowel rolling pin that I wanted to use for this class. So I've got this big old beast out here, and I'm going to go ahead and just start rolling these out. You'll see lots of pizza joints having a little roller of some kind, and you know, a sheeter or something to roll their doughs through. Okay, but we are just going to do it by hand. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and flatten it out a little bit, make sure it's not sticky, just get enough flour on there. And I'm going to bring in my rolling pin to just kind of expand the size. Now it just stuck to the table, so I'm going to pick it up and just get a little more flour. It needs to be floating at all times. See how that's floating? It's not sticking. So I'm going to give it a roll. Might have a little trouble. It keeps wanting to squeeze back into its original size because it just hasn't quite had enough resting time. That's what the resting time is all about, by the way. Make sure that it's floating on the table. And I think I'm getting a little bit bigger there. Stuck to the table a little, throwing more down. And yeah, these guys are having a little trouble getting rolled out. So I'm going to let that one rest slightly while I work on this other one. I think this is the one I need to work on next. So a little bit of flour, and I just roll them on out. Make sure they're not sticking to your table. Get just enough flour down to where they're not sticking. Just started sticking to my rolling pin that time. So I'm going to get flour on the other side. And yeah, see how it wants to just keep snapping back. And that's where you get the oddball shapes, when it sticks to your table. So I'm going to let that go. We're going to roll those a little bit more in a second here. I'm just rushing it a little here, guys, is what it is. Yeah, absolutely, with the AP flour. AP flour won't have as much gluten development, of course. You probably know about that business. I keep turning this, as if it turns into an oval, I'll turn it. See how it's oval shaped right now? I turn it so I can round that oval out. And see how it's a little shy on this side? I'm going to turn it, pull that edge towards me and round that edge out. This side was a little flat, so I went that way. And you steer the dough around with your comically large rolling pin. That's a pretty decent shape and size there. So in many of your pizzerias, I was saying they have a little sheeting machine, and it'll run it through to about this thickness. And I'm going to go back through with that first one I did and roll it even further. It just needs a little more resting time. I'm just trying to roll this because it's live TV. It's always been one of those things I've wanted to do, is teach the 10 steps of yeast dough production. And I think pizza is probably one of the ways that I could kind of get it done, because I can kind of skip another step here. We're going straight from makeup into the oven, where many yeast doughs, we're going to have another proofing session. Okay, so I just rolled out my doughs into rounds. They were stretching back, so now I'm going to give them another try. I think that guy's relaxed a little bit. This is good. We're talking about gluten dynamics. This is part of it. And now I'm bringing over what we call a peel, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw some semolina down, like a goodly amount, and I need my dough to sit on that and slide on it so I can drop this down onto a pizza stone that I have in my oven, okay? So we are engaging with the peel now. Let me move a dough, and I think I can get a little bit more size out of this, but I don't want to make it too big. I got a small pizza stone. I think what I'll do is go ahead and stretch now. And I'm not going to toss this in the air. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I only got one freaking eye and I just cannot catch things very well, okay? So what I did was I just kind of stretched it. You want to you can use your knuckles, but you don't want to use your fingertips, okay? And see how it's getting much bigger now? Lean it on down. And I'm going to round that out on my peel, okay? See how it's kind of, I can just kind of stretch it around. And I want to point out that I have enough flour to where that whole thing is sliding around, isn't it? Okay. And so there's my first pizza. I'm going to build one right here, all right? It's a pizza party. Let me pull out some toppings here and talk about those, and then we'll go ahead and top this fella. And then I can roll through the rest of these. Let's see, would you use the same technique if you were going to bake it in a pan instead of on a stone? So if I was doing it into a pan, I would be doing my makeup straight into the pan. So at this point, I'd be, instead of going onto a peel, this is where I'd be going onto a pan. And then I'd be going onto a hot oven. And that works great when you've got a deck oven, you know, like one of those, one of those New York style deck ovens where the heat's coming off of the stone in the bottom and it can conduct up through that pizza pan. Those work really well. That's where you do your New York style slices. So the pizza that I'm going to do is just kind of a throwback to a pizza my wife and I used to get when we lived in San Francisco. It's super, super simple. It's pesto, it's olive, it's feta cheese and mushrooms. It's super simple. It's one of our favorite pizzas. I think my pesto, it got a little cold in the refrigerator, so I'm going to add a little bit of oil so it's a little slightly more spreadable. And we're going to make a pie. I've got to do a few things with some toppings here. So I'm rolling through my topping mise en place. So I just thinned that out with a little bit of oil. I have other things here. I have some olives. I don't have to do anything with those. I have some feta cheese here. Let me go ahead and crumble that up. I usually kind of press it through a screen, right? So if you have any kind of a screen in your kitchen, you can just press feta cheese, eggs to make egg salad, anything like that through here, goat cheese. I like to use these screens to chunk stuff up. So there is some beautifully crumbled feta. It's ready to go for my pizza. Awesome. Let's see, I've got some mozzarella cheese, just as a base cheese. You got to have a base cheese. So here is that. I'll just keep my two cheeses together. You can see it all lining up. And then let's see, mushrooms, okay? Now, I've got several mushrooms here. I can kind of maybe zoom in a little more, okay? Now, these are those king oyster mushrooms, okay? And I just did them paper thin slices. We're going to be doing a super hot, super fast pizza right now. And so I need something that's going to cook fast. Also, a dry mushroom is not going to really do much in there. So you're going to see me macerate these with a little oil, or you could even saute your mushrooms ahead of time. But these, I want them to kind of cook right on the pizza. So I went super thin, and I'm going to oil them to help conduct heat into the mushrooms, okay? I also have some shiitakes here, nothing fancy, and I cut them into basically shiitake chips. They're almost paper thin, okay? They're gonna cook super fast, especially with a little coating of oil. I'm gonna season them up as well. And then the stars of the show here, I've finally found some viable oyster mushrooms growing out in the Pacific Northwest, okay? So those are my very first forage mushrooms. They're the only ones I gotta prep here. I'm just gonna pull them apart. I have never touched a knife to an oyster mushroom in my life. I always just pull them apart. I just love the look of that. Oh yeah, finally found oyster mushrooms. I found a lot of old rotten oyster mushrooms, but no viable ones. So almost done with this. And then, as I said, I want to macerate these mushrooms. So I'm just gonna drizzle a bit of olive oil on here. Again, dry mushrooms, they're just gonna dry, okay? The oil is gonna kind of soak into them. It's gonna conduct heat into the mushroom itself, through and through. I'm gonna knock in a little pepper here, why not? A little black pepper and salt, the old classic standby. And a little salt, here we go. And I'm just gonna give it all a quick toss. I just want it oily so it cooks. And I've got assorted mushrooms, I've got olives, I've got feta, mozzarella, and pesto, and that's what's going on my pizza, okay? Very, very simple. I'll probably make two of them. And I could call this like a Greek pizza almost, right? Yum on the oyster mushrooms, yes. Yes, there are only a few mushrooms I feel safe enough to try to forage in the woods, and oyster is one of them. Okay, let me go back into making up this pizza. If you like, you can go ahead and punch holes in your pizza. I like to punch the holes as it's cooking, so I'll kind of check that as it's cooking. I'm gonna drop a little bit of pesto. If you're like me, you don't go too heavy on sauce on your pizzas. I just do a light smattering, if you will, especially pesto, it's pretty strong. But even like a red sauce on a pizza, I am just not wild about a soupy pizza. I like it light. Making sure that's still sliding. You see it sliding on my board? Oh, it's all coming together, people. Okay, I'm gonna lay down a little base of mozzarella on this baby. Just a little. I want to see some green through there. And I want that green oil bubbling up through that mozzarella like I was used to in that San Francisco pie that my wife and I used to get. I'm gonna drop my mushrooms. They're gonna be hard to see underneath everything, but we're just going to get a little creative. I like things to look random. It's about all the king mushrooms I want to use on there. Throw some shiitakes down. The shiitakes actually look like mushrooms. Boom, boom. Okay, that's a nice little smattering of mushroom. Okay, I'm going to throw down my olives next. And these are just black olives out of a can. Again, it's a tribute to a pizza we used to eat. Love this one. There it is, black olives, and then finally just some feta cheese over the top, and we're ready to launch. As I cook this pizza, I'll just bang out another one, and I'll call it a day after that, okay? So right now we are on step number 8. This is called makeup. If I was, like I said, if I was doing a loaf of bread or something like that, this is when I'd be doing the loaves, okay? But since I'm doing pizza, this is when I'm doing the pizza, okay? It's not really a pizza class, is it? It's a dough class, right? So we're getting ready to go into the oven. I have preheated my oven as high as it'll go. Mine goes to 500. Okay, so that's what we got. I am going to drop it. I've got a preheated pizza stone in there. It's just a 13-inch round, and I want this to hit that 13-inch round. And it's still moving on there. Okay, I just kind of gave it a little shake. Okay, still moving on there, and we just got to do it. Okay, it's a little nervous, but we're gonna do it. Now, other things. In my oven, I put a large iron griddle in the bottom of my oven. It's going to catch some of this excess semolina, but it's also a big, heavy piece of metal, and it's going to kind of help retain thermal energy in my oven so I get a better recover time when I open and close my door. Okay, so that's another little trick thing that I have in there. Let's go ahead and drop this pizza in. Let me see if you can see my oven. I think I can't move the oven or get the camera over here or anything, so here we go. I'm going to pull the rack out and drop this guy right on there, and it landed perfectly. Okay, I'm going to set a timer for about, I think I'll check it in 9 minutes. So while that's going, let's go ahead and make another one of these, and you can see it for a second time. I kind of just rolled through that shaping very quickly. By the way, I have a little ricotta cheese in there. I might even make a calzone later on, okay, just messing around with these other doughs. But yeah, we only need 2 of them around Casa de Nelson. So again, I'm going to go ahead and prepare my peel here with a little bit of flour on it. Actually, a pretty decent amount of flour, okay? I need that dough to be able to float. Got to float. And I'm just going to pick up another one, and I'm kind of done with my rolling pin. And I just get underneath, and I'm using my fists here. Whoa, I'm using my fists. Let me fix that. To just let gravity pull the pizza in different directions, pull the dough in different directions. So let me see what I got here. It's getting very, very thin in the center, and it's kind of a little too thick on the edges. So I just kind of brought it down to the table. The gravity's a little too much right now, and I think I've kind of thinned out the edges a little. There we go. So this guy's a little bigger, maybe. Yeah, he's about the same. Okay, I've got a basic shape there. I will do the rest of this on the board. So here we go. It goes right on the peel, and it's sliding. And I'm going to round it out. Boom. I thought it was going to be a trapezoid, but it rounded out nicely. Boom, there it is, okay? All right. What do you think of using cornmeal on the peel? So cornmeal, absolutely. Yeah, that I should have said that too, because I think someone else mentioned that earlier, if it wasn't you, Debbie, but cornmeal absolutely works. Those big chunks, depending on your oven, they can really, really burn. I find that the semolina and rice flours tend to brush away a little easier, but if you have like a heavy cornmeal, that can be a little, you'll bite into these little burnt pieces of cornmeal, and that's not very fun. So here I go with another pesto. And something that I forgot to do last time that I should have been doing is I usually throw a little cracked salt, a little sea salt over the top of the pizza too. Because some of those items, you know, I season the mushrooms slightly, but they could probably use another little pinch. So this time I want to go ahead and do that. And I usually do it after I do this pesto business. Making sure the actual dough has enough seasoning and everything. I usually do season it. Okay, so last time we threw the mushrooms down first, so we're doing the same thing. I want to make sure this, I got kind of a dry mushroom there. I think this is an excellent application if you're ever wondering what to do with these king oyster mushrooms, right? Just this paper thin slice on a pizza. It's perfect. Throw down some, well, I suppose I should put something down. Throw down my shiitakes. I got my foraged oyster pieces. I'm so proud. I have the mushroom hunting bug, by the way, since I moved up to the Pacific Northwest. I go out almost every day, and every day that I'm not looking for mushrooms, I'm sitting there wondering why I'm not looking for them. Oh, darn, I forgot my mozzarella cheese. Nobody caught me. I'm just going to put a tiny bit over the mushrooms. I got to do it this way now. Again, I wasn't going very heavy with that mozzarella. I want things to kind of poke through. I want to see green behind that. There we go. And now I'm going with my olives. Bad chef. Forgot your mozzarella. I got so excited with my mushrooms. Now I won't be able to see them. And then a bit of a feta. One more mushroom or olive. And there it is. I love this combination. You could work spinach into this pizza as well. A little Greek, especially make it even more Greek. It's beautiful. Okay, and that is my second pizza, okay? We're working on bacon here. Let me go ahead and take a look at that. Let me see if you guys can see in there as well. Turn on my oven light. I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see this, but oh gosh, it looks like a pizza. I don't even wanna open it, it's not ready yet. I've got 4 minutes on that clock right there. Well, gosh, I think I can go ahead and make another pizza while I wait. I want to at least pull one pizza out for you guys. So I think I'm just going to keep cranking these things out. I think I got enough mushroom to make one more. So if you don't have a peel, you can use just a little half sheet pan or a small sheet pan if you turn it upside down. So that's what I'm going to do right here. I'm going to throw down a little more flour on here, and I'm going to move it off the peel onto this. This will be the next one to go in. It's not perfect. Actually, I think I'll just leave that one alone. I'm just going to treat this other one as a peel. And I'm going to be here making pizza for a while here. It shouldn't take too long. Usually, you know, when we used to do pizza ovens, like commercial pizza ovens, are running about 700-800 degrees. Those pizzas were coming out in about 7 minutes in those things. They were super quick. That's how restaurants can get away with those things. So I'm just going to use this as a peel. You can see I can use the underside of this. I'll grab the next dough and just start shaping it. And these guys have been sitting around a little bit. I'm talking so much. So I'm not stretching this as much as I might normally. I just want to get some of the bulk out of the edges here. But it's getting really thin in the center. Let me just throw it on down and round it out. I'm getting a pretty consistent size and just making sure that it's sliding, and it is, okay? So here we go on the next. Hope my wife likes pizza. I'm gonna run out of, I've only got enough to make 3 of these guys. Maybe I'll do a little dessert pizza with this last one. That one's just for me. This time the mozzarella is going down before the mushrooms. And some more cheese. Can you freeze the extra dough? You can absolutely freeze that extra piece of dough. I will say I'm going to use this one just because I felt like it proofed a little more than I would have liked. But absolutely, this other dough that I made, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing with it, Gina. I'm just going to cut it into 2 pieces and freeze it. And then I have it. Thank you, Debbie. Don't forget the salt. Thanks. This is working out great. I'm going to kick a little salt on there. Perfect timing. I love it. And here go the other mushrooms, the final mushroom. Here we go. Sorry about that, guys. That was horrible. That song's going to be an earworm for me all week, too. All right. So we've got mushrooms down, we've got olives, and we've got feta. Oh, yeah. I think I'll take one of these to a neighbor or something. And feta to finish. And I'm starting to smell a little burning. Now, some of that burning might be the semolina under the pizza. Very common. I'm going to take another look. Oh, yeah, this is looking great. So there's my timer. Cancel. And we're going to take another look in this oven here, okay? I kind of want to see underneath that pizza. So before I start pulling stuff out, I'm just going to take a quick look. I'm grabbing things with my fingers, so don't freak out. I do things like that. Oh yeah, it's not. Look at that pie. It's beautiful. I got little golden brown on the feta and everything. It's exactly what I'm looking for. Oh yeah. And the mushrooms are just semi-cooked. They're going to be excellent. Okay. I love it. It's that little trick of macerating those things ahead of time. Another one that a pet peeve of mine, if you're throwing like basil leaves on your pizza, macerate them in a little oil. Just dry basil leaves on a pizza just drives me nuts. So let me get the next pizza in the oven. Okay. Oh, yeah, it's still sliding on my peel. Let me get this adjusted here. And again, I'm going to pull it out. Now, if there's a ton of semolina on here, you want to clean that off. Otherwise, it's just going to burn. You get that sliding and lay it on in. Oh my gosh. I'm so pleased that this is working in front of all of you nice people. Okay. It could really just trash everything. But you just witnessed the baking portion of this, okay? Now, when I pull something out, let me go over that, okay? We're doing these little personal pizzas in a restaurant. They're coming out of the oven. We're using a peel to pull them out, okay? So it's not coming out on one of these sheet pans or anything, but we're gonna lay it down on our cutting board. See it, okay? And I don't know about you, but I don't use an Italian chef's knife to cut this thing. It's just an extra tool I got to carry around and, you know, out there when I'm carrying tools, right? So normally I've just got a big knife that I use for these guys. This knife is just big enough to go across this size of pizza. This is a 10-inch pizza, okay? It's a standard size, same size as your standard cakes in a bakery, okay? And so I'm just going to go straight across that dude, and I cut them in 6 pieces. Industry standard when you go out and get your little pizzas like this. 6 pizzas, and then to plate this thing, you just grab a plate and just shove the pie right onto the plate, and throw it in the window. That's where it goes, okay? So that came out beautifully. I just threw another one in there. I think I've kind of covered how to make dough here and how to get it into a pizza and how to kind of simulate a pizza oven and everything. If you do not have a pizza stone for an oven, what I was going to do is I was going to use one of these for a pizza stone in there, okay? It's just our baking pan, a sheet pan. We call this a half sheet pan, okay? And I was just going to heat this up to 500 degrees and drop my pizzas right on there, okay? Yeah, that's the bottom. I wouldn't mind getting a little more color on the bottom, okay? But we just got kind of a funky little oven situation here. It's not like a deck oven or a wood-fired oven in a restaurant or something, okay? So let's see, what's that question there? Should I macerate arugula too? Now arugula is another thing. I usually throw the arugula on at the end, but if you're gonna bake your arugula, yeah, I would macerate it a little bit. So again, so it doesn't dry out. And also, if you have that oil on those leaves, the edges get that crispiness to them that I love with, I did some grilled radishes last night and left the greens on, and I got that crispy leaf on there. I just love that flavor. And so that's kind of a cool thing to do. Get the oil on that. And if I'm finishing a pizza with a salad on top, always dress it. I never just throw dry greens on a pizza. You will never see me throw a microgreen on a pizza. Okay, I put, it's just non-essential garnish is what it is. You're just adding it for color. I only put things on if they're an element of the dish, right? And so if I'm finishing a pizza with a salad, I want that salad to be dressed. I want it to be seasoned. I want the salad itself to be part of its own part of the experience. It should stand on its own without the pizza, or it should rock with the pizza as well, okay? So let's see, how long to heat the stone? I turned mine on, gosh, it took about 20 minutes. I'm sure you could go longer, but this is a pretty thin stone. So a thicker stone, I would go much longer with that, okay? Would you dock in the middle of the dough if you wanted a thicker edge to the crust versus a thin center? I usually, when I'm doing these California style pizza or Neapolitan, if you want to call them that, you know, they're not super authentic here, but if I'm doing those, I tend not to dock them. I kind of like natural bubbles busting up and everything. And the docking is about like popping the bubbles most of the time. Let's see, if you wanted a thicker edge of the crust. Usually my problem is getting the crust more thin than thick. Usually it's too thick and I'm trying to work it into being thinner. And that's kind of what was happening with me today. I'll admit my dough was a little overproof today. I was getting a little shaggy at the end there and everything. No, hopefully that helps. I tend not to dock my like Neapolitan or California style pizzas. Okay. Let's see. I don't see any other questions there. Let me go ahead and bring it on home for you guys. Okay. I got little personal pan pizzas. So basically, that was the Tao of Pizza. We covered 10 steps that are common to basically any yeasty dough that you see in this one. Let's go ahead and go through them again, okay? We went through scaling in the beginning. I already had my stuff weighed out, but we kind of talked about it, okay? We talked about mixing methods. That's step 2 is mixing, and we did the straight mix method today. Again, putting yeast into the water, letting it dissolve, and then adding your dries into that, and then let her rip. Okay. Let's see. The next step, step 3 is fermentation or fermenting, or bulk ferment is really kind of the official way to say it. Okay. So bulk ferment, you're allowing the dough, the yeast to work on the dough, to consume that food in there. It's going to kick out a bunch of CO2. It's also going to kick out a little bit of alcohol. And that's why our breads have that beer, yeasty beer taste to them. Okay. Let's see. After we ferment, we punch most of that gas out there, and then we scale the dough out. We portion it to whatever sizes we want. If I'm doing loaves of bread, they can be like 2-pound loaves or a pound loaf or something like that. So I'm literally scaling those pieces of dough. I round those doughs and then kind of let them relax on the bench. So that's 6 and 7. Rounding is step 6, and then benching them, step 7. That benching them allows it to relax enough for you to be able to work on it. Remember, my dough was like stretching back. I didn't have enough benching time, right? And then you go into makeup, and you saw me roll pizza, but that could be making loaves for bread. It could be making rolls. It could be making lobster rolls. Anything that you're doing, if it's a yeast dough, hey, makeup is step 8, okay? And then we did the retard or proofing, retarding in the refrigerator. I think Debbie was kind of talking about 2 to 3 days of retarding. That seems excessive. I've never done anything that long, okay? But yeah, I don't know. So step 9 is either retarding or proofing, and I showed you kind of a little proof box you can make out of a bus tub or like a roasting pan or something, a laundry box, or a cardboard box if you wanted to. Probably work, right? And then step 10 is baking, and that's a whole conversation onto its own. Okay, so that was basically what we talked about for the Tao of Pizza. Okay, I am your host, Dave Nelson, and I am laying down culinary basics every Monday in the industry cooking community on Facebook. If you want to check out our exclusive video archives, head on over to YouTube and subscribe to Industry Cooking for full access. I've got loads and loads of culinary treasure over there. In the meantime, like and share Industry Cooking with all of your little friends, everyone, and post pictures of your epic food victories over in the Industry Cooking community. We got lots of people over there. We got people answering questions and just kicking ideas around. It's a great food place. Okay, so that was the Tao of Pizza, everyone. I'm kind of glad I did this party. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Tao of Pizza and all other yeast doughs. It was a metaphor, people. It was a metaphor, okay? Now, don't forget, all of you, that the party is always in the kitchen. Ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that class is dismissed.